Hey guys, it's your favorite non-AI scary story reader here, and I'm back with a couple really good ones for you today. And while I'm reading these stories, I need to remodel the front of my base because it's been in shambles for a while. Let's go ahead and get started with the first story. The first story today is from r/scary stories from user Donovan221. I found my missing son after 20 years of searching. Looking back now, I think it was destiny that me and my wife had that argument. I won't go too in depth, but I will say it wasn't the first time I'd stormed out of the house in a rage. Ever since Matthew went missing, it was either solemn silence or violent outbursts between me and her. He was our son, the one thing in this world we were supposed to protect with every ounce of strength in our bodies, only for him to disappear right below our noses. We used to hike as a family, head up to the trails and get away from the city. It was grounding, tantalizing almost. Picnicking, taking dips in whatever stream or river we could find, feeling Mother Nature embrace us in her arms. Hell, I still remember the hike we went on the day everything happened, the day our lives crumbled around us. March 16th, 2006. The air was starting to warm up again here in the south. Trees had started blossoming again. The sun felt actually inviting rather than ironic. Matthew was 6 at the time. His mother and I had planned an entire day out for our journey, packing water, soda, sandwiches, and each one of our favorite snacks. Things were going smoothly until about a half mile into the hike. My wife had to use the bathroom, and she made sure that me and Matthew knew it, complaining every 100 steps or so. It got to a breaking point when her complaints began to carry anger with them. "Can you just stop for 1 second?" she snapped, glaring at the two of us. "Whoa there, honey," I replied as gently as possible. "No need to get upset. We'll stop. Here, I'll just stay here with Matt. You go do your business." We stepped a few feet off the trail, and me and Matthew leaned up against a boulder in the forest while his mom went behind a distant tree to do her thing. I noticed that the forest was quieter than usual. Not even a single chirp of a bird. In hindsight, that should have been a dead giveaway, but in the moment, all I could think about was just how beautiful the weather was. Not a single cloud in the sky, just a bright blue canvas that looked almost too perfect. While we waited, the two of us teased a bit, poking fun at how, even though she had tried to put distance between us, we could still hear the trickle of pee hitting the leaves. We went back and forth until a new sound, the snapping of a twig, choked the laughter in our throats. That's all it took. The brief moment it took for me to turn my head, and he was gone. I thought he was playing a prank at first, hiding behind the rock, waiting to jump out and scare me. I called his name once, twice, 3 times, and was met with that same unnatural silence. As if to taunt me, right on the brink of my panic attack, the forest exploded. Leaves rustling, twigs snapping, and footsteps. Fast ones that erupted through the brush at a breakneck speed. My wife came running back when she heard my shouts, appearing to be panicking herself, even though she didn't even know what had happened yet. It wasn't long before she noticed Matthew's absence, though. They were the first words out of her mouth. "Where's Matthew?" No response. "Honey, where did Matthew go? Did he have to pee too?" I'm crying now. "Donovan, where is our son?" There are a few questions that could break a man in half, but this one destroyed me. I didn't know how to answer her. All I could do was stammer through an explanation. He was right here. I looked away for 1 second. I don't know where he went." There are a multitude of things that made my wife blame me for what happened this day, but I think that last sentence is what really drove home her newfound hatred of me. We didn't have time to dwell on that now, though. My wife didn't even wait for the last word to leave my mouth before she was darting off through the woods. The two of us must have searched an entire 5-mile radius before the sun went down, and another 5 before it rose again the next morning. With a search team, there wasn't a single part of that forest that hadn't been searched. And through all that looking, all we found of my boy was his left sneaker. The laces were untied, and that made my heart shatter in a way that I can't explain. I just pictured him out there, alone and barefoot. It was nothing but emptiness between my wife and I from that day forward. I wanted our love to continue, but she had checked out entirely. We were both alone in the same room. I think what kept us together were the search efforts. In some sort of twisted way, it was like a hobby for us to search the woods, to pin up posters, to maintain hope. I swear, it was like we were being toyed with every time we went back to that forest. Maybe it was just our minds breaking. Maybe we really were hearing our son call for us just beyond our reach. Maybe that's what kept us there. Illusion can only take you so far, though, and after years of enduring that illusion, I think both of our tanks were running on empty. That's probably why the argument started. We argued before, but now those spats had teeth. Personal, ugly, marriage-ending spats. We never tried for another child. It felt like betrayal, like we were abandoning the old for something new. Matthew was gone. There was nothing left for us. Each fight brought us closer and closer to the thread we had been hanging from for the last year. So when last night's argument began, I knew that thread had been severed. Instead of the usual screaming match, we just agreed with each other. Agreed that we had reached the end. There was a calmness around us. Not a good calm, the kind of calm that comes right before the explosion of sound, and I wasn't going to be around for that bang. So I left, unsure of what to do. Though I'd been sober for 8 years at this point, I found it extraordinarily difficult to resist the buried urge. I can't even say it was by luck that I came across my son's missing person poster on the way to the local bar. Maybe in some alternate reality, I would have taken a different path, walked past a store I'd never seen before. But the truth is, I'd walked this route 1,000 times, watched my son's face get replaced by advertisements and missing pets. That's the thing, though. It had been covered up, buried beneath years' worth of replacements. I can't think of a feasible reason as to why it was in that storefront window, looking freshly printed. I stopped walking, freezing in place at the sight. "Have you seen me?" The words felt like a challenge. I was sick of those things taunting me, sick of feeling alone, sick of feeling blamed, and sick of not having my goddamn son. I didn't need to be piss drunk to find the will to go back to that forest. The fire that burned inside me was enough to get me there and push me forward into the trees. I felt swallowed by the tall pines, a feeling that I had become far too familiar with over the last 20 years. My knees ached, my heart raced, I felt tired. I wasn't the man I was the year my son went missing. I was 48 years old at this point. I'd slowed down. Life had beaten a lot out of me, but not everything. And I used that little pinch of energy I had left to put my everything into one final search. With nothing but the flashlight on my phone to guide me, I searched like a madman. It was as though I had rediscovered the same adrenaline and restlessness I had on the day it happened. I didn't even keep track of time. It felt like every second that passed was a second that brought me closer to my sweet Matthew. All I knew was look harder than you have in your whole life. That's the funniest part, or the cruelest, depending on how you look at it. I was so entranced that it was by sheer accident that I stumbled onto that rock. That lone boulder in the woods. I could replay the scene in my head perfectly. My wife walking deeper into the woods. Me and Matthew giggling with each other. Up until this point, I figured the forest was silent due to the fact that it was nighttime. But now, I was thinking something else. Something darker. I'd been in these woods thousands of times since he went missing. Never once had it been silent. And now that I was thinking about it, I realized that it wasn't even silent at night. The silence was an omen, a calm before the storm. As if to punctuate my thoughts, once again, the forest erupted with noise. It's a weird feeling when your already racing heart drops into your stomach. I don't know whether to pass out or start running. What froze me in my tracks, however, is when the sounds of the forest morphed into something foreign to the forest, but deeply familiar to me. It was like his voice surrounded me, encircled me from every corner of the woods. "Dad, help me, Dad. Dad, I want to go home. Please." The voices were off. It was like there was no emotion behind them, just flat pleas. Nevertheless, it had me spinning in circles. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the voices stopped. The woods fell silent again. The only sound that I could hear was the snapping of a twig behind me. I turned slowly at first, afraid of what my eyes would show me the moment I turned around. However, when I heard my son's voice from directly behind me, it had me breaking my neck to look. "Look at me, Dad," announced in that same monotone voice. And there he was, my sweet, sweet boy, my beautiful baby Matthew, missing a shoe, smiling at me with that same snaggletooth smile. I scooped him up into my arms. I could finally feel him again. But what I felt didn't feel like how I remembered. There was no warmth in his stiff body. It didn't even feel like he wanted to hug me. His arms lay limply on my back as I squeezed him. I put 20 years of pain and suffering into that hug, and all I could feel was emptiness. "Come back with me, Dad," Matthew croaked. "I want you to meet my new family." Setting my son back down on the ground, I looked him in his eyes as he spoke to me about his new family. As I did so, I don't know if it's due to the fact that it was dark or if my mind was just playing tricks on me, but Matthew's eyes looked pitch black. "We've all been waiting so long for you to find us, Dad. You finally did it. We can all be together now." With a cold, limp hand, my son grabbed me by mine and began tugging me deeper into the forest. With each step, it seemed like a new pair of footsteps joined us, keeping their distance from us as they stomped through the fallen leaves and pine cones. All I could do was follow him. I'd waited 20 years for this moment. I swear, Skinwalker stories never fail to disappoint. Well, it sounds like at the end, his dad did really get what he desired. I mean, a Skinwalker definitely did end up like wearing his face or whatever, however that goes. But you know, it sounds like he was kind of just done. He was just done with it to begin with. The next story today is from r/scary stories from user EclosionK2. My neighbors say they've known my son for years. I've never had children. How old must he be now? 8 or 9? I stared at my neighbor, unsure what she was asking. She read the confusion on my face. "Your cute little guy. I saw him biking down the lane earlier. He must be old enough for grade 4 now, right?" Miss Babbage was a bit on the older side, but I never thought she had shown signs of dementia, not until now. I wasn't exactly sure what to say. She proceeded to stare at me, tilting her head as if I was the one misremembering. I awkwardly opened my mouth. "Oh, right, my little guy." She brightened. "Yes, he must be in grade 4, right?" "Sure, I mean, yes, he is." "What a cute little guy," she said, and returned to watering her flowers. It was an odd, slightly sad moment. I wondered if her husband had seen glimmers of this too. I could only hope that this was a momentary blip and not the sign of anything Alzheimer's related. I took the rest of my groceries out of my car and entered home. I had a long day of teaching, and I just wanted to sit back, unwind, and watch something light on TV. But as soon as I took my first shoe off, I smelled it. Something burning on the stove. Something burning with lots of cheese on it. The hell? I dashed over to the kitchen and almost fell down. Partially because I was wearing only one shoe, but also because there was a scrawny little boy frying Kraft dinner. I let out a half scream. But very quickly, I composed myself into the same assertive adult who taught at a university. "What? Excuse me. Who are you? What are you doing here?" The boy's blonde, willow-like hair whipped around his face as he looked at me with equal surprise. "Papa? What do you mean? I'm here. He was a scared, confused child, and I couldn't quite place the bizarre inflection of his words. "Do you want some KD, Papa? Have some. Alright, I'm convinced this is 11 from Stranger Things. Was that a Russian accent? It took me a second to realize he was wearing an oversized shirt that looked just like mine. Was he wearing my clothes? I held out my palms like I would at a lecture. My standard, everyone settle down gesture, and cleared my throat. "I'm sorry, I don't know who you are, or what this is." The boy widened his eyes, still frightened by my intensity. He stirred the food with a wooden spoon. "It's KD, Papa, your favorite, chili cheese kind, don't you remember?" His name was Dimitri, and he claimed to be my son. Apparently at some point there had been a mother, but he didn't remember much about her. He only remembered me. You've been my papa my whole life. My whole life, Papa. I tried having a sit-down conversation. In fact, I tried to have many sit-down conversations where I explained to Dimitri that that would be impossible. But it always ended with him clutching me with impassioned tears, begging me to remember him. The confusion only got worse when my mother called. "How's my grandson doing?" she asked. I didn't know how to reply. The conversation grew awkward and tense until eventually I clarified my whole predicament. "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't have a son. I've never had a son." My mother gasped a little, then laughed and scolded me, saying I shouldn't joke around like that, because of course I've always had a son, a smart little guy who will be celebrating 9 this weekend. I hung up. I stood petrified in my own kitchen, staring at this strange, expectant Slavic child. For the next 10 minutes, all I could do was ask where his parents were, and he just continued to act frightened, like any authentic kid might, and replied with the same question. "How did you forget me, Papa?" My method wasn't getting me anywhere, so I decided to play along. I cleared my head with a shot of espresso. I told him my brain must have been scrambled from overworking, and I apologized for not remembering I was his father. He brightened immediately. "It's okay, Papa, it's okay." He gave me a hug. "You always work so hard." The tension dropped further as Dimitri finished making the noodles and served himself some. I politely declined and watched him eat, and he watched me watch him eat. "So you're okay now? You're not angry?" His accent was so odd. "No," I said, "I'm not angry. I was just a little scrambled." His eyes shimmered, looking more expectant. "So we can be normal now?" A warm chill trickled down my neck. I didn't really know what to say, but for whatever reason, I did not want to say, "Yes, we can be normal now," because this was not normal. Far from it. This child was not my son. He started playing with his food and quivered a little, like a worried mouse seeking reassurance. "Everything will be fine," I eventually said. "No need to stress. Enjoy your noodles." To my shock and dismay, I discovered that Dimitri also had his own room. My home office had somehow been replaced by a barren, clay-walled chamber filled with linen curtains, old wooden toys, and a simple bed. The smell of bread and earth wafted throughout. I watched him play with his blocks and spinning tops for about a half an hour before he started to yawn and say he wanted to go to sleep. It was the strangest thing tucking him in. He didn't want to switch to pajamas or anything. He just sort of hopped into his straw bed and asked me to hold his hand. Dimitri's fingers were cold, slightly clammy little things. It was very bizarre, comforting him like my own son, but it appeared to work. He softened and lay still. He didn't ask for any lullaby or bedtime story. He just wanted to hold my hand for a minute. "Thank you, Papa. I'm so glad you're here. So glad you can be my papa. Good night." I inched my way out of the room and watched him through the crack of his door. At about 9:30, he gave small, childlike snores. He had fallen asleep. Cautiously, I called Pat, my coworker with whom I shared close contact. She had the same reaction as my mother. "Harlan, of course you have a son, from your marriage to Svetlana." "My marriage to who?" "You met her in Moscow when you were touring Europe?" It was true that I had a guest lecture 15 years ago across the UK, Germany, and Russia. I was awarded a grant for it, but I only stayed in Moscow for 3 days. I never met anyone named Svetlana. "Don't be weird, Harlan, come on." Pat's conviction was very disturbing. "You and Svetlana were together for many years." "We were? How many?" "Look, I know the divorce was hard, but you shouldn't pretend your ex-wife doesn't exist." "I'm not pretending, I'm being serious. I don't remember her." "Then get some sleep." I sipped on my second espresso of the night. "But I have slept. I'm fine." "Well, then I don't get what this joke is. Knock it off, it's creepy." "I'm not joking." "I'll see you tomorrow for the birthday." "Birthday? Yes, your son's birthday. Jesus Christ, good night, Harlan. Get some sleep." I didn't sleep that night. My efforts were spent scouring the filing cabinets and drawers throughout my house. I had credit card bills covering school supplies, kids' clothing, and costlier groceries. I even had pictures of Dmitri hung around the walls from various ages. It's like everything was conforming to this new reality. The harder I looked for clues to disprove my fatherhood, the more evidence I found confirming it. It was Dmitri who woke me up off the living room couch and said Uncle Boris was here. Uncle Boris? I peeked through the window and could see a very large blond man smiling back at me. Behind him was a gaggle of other relatives all speaking Russian to each other. Hello, Harlan. The blond man's voice penetrated past the glass. We are here for the birthday. They all looked excited and motioned to the front door. They were all wearing tunics and leggings, traditional birthday clothes or something. I was completely floored. I didn't know what to do, so I just sort of nodded and subtly slinked back into my kitchen. Dmitri came to pull at my arm. Come on, we have to let them in. I don't know any of them. Yes, you do. It's Uncle Boris. I yanked my hand away. It was one thing to pretend I was this kid's dad for a night. It was quite another to let a group of strangers into my house first thing in the morning. Dmitri frowned. I'll open the door. Wait, hold on. I grabbed Dmitri's shoulder. He turned away. Let go. I tried to pull him back, but then he dragged me into the living room again. Our struggle was on display for everyone outside. Boris looked at me with saucer eyes. Dmitri pulled harder, and I had no choice but to pull harder back. The boy hit his head on the table as he fell. Boris yelled something in Russian. Someone else hollered back. I heard hands trying to wrench open my door. Dmitri, stop, I said. Let's just take a minute to... You're hurting me. My front door unlocked. Footsteps barreled inside. I let go of my son and watched 3 large Slavic men enter my house with stern expressions. Dmitri hid behind them. Is everything okay? Boris peered down on me through his tangle of blonde hair. Yes, sorry, I said, struggling to find my words. I'm just very confused. Confused? Why were you hitting Dmitri? The little boy pulled on his uncle's arm and whispered something into his ear. Boris's expression furrowed, but before I could speak further, a slender pair of arms pushed aside all the male figures and revealed a woman with unwavering, bloodshot eyes. Something in me knew it was her, Svetlana. She wore a draped brown sheet as a dress, with skin so pale I could practically see her sinews and bones. It's like she had some extreme form of albinism. Harlan, she said, somehow breaking my name into 3 syllables. I've never been so instinctively afraid of a person in my life. It's like she had weaved herself out of the darkest edges of memory. I saw flashes of her holding my waist in Moscow, outside Red Square. Flashes of her lips whispering chants in the shadows of St. Basil's Cathedral. Svetlana held Dmitri's shoulder, then looked up at me. Just tell him it will be normal. Tell him everything will be normal. No, this is not happening. None of this is real. Barefoot and still wearing the same clothes as yesterday, I bolted out of the back of my house and hurtled towards my driveway. Before the rest of my new family could realize what was going on, I hopped into my Subaru and stepped on the gas. As I drove away from my house, I looked back into my rearview mirror, and I swear, it didn't look like my house at all. I swear it looked like a thatched roof hut. Back at the university, I walled myself up in my study. I canceled all speaking arrangements for the next week, saying I needed a few personal days. No one in my department knew I had a son. Nothing in my study indicated I had an extended Russian family. When I asked Pat about our phone conversation last night, her response was, "What conversation?" My mom said the same thing. With immense trepidation, I returned to my house the following day. And after setting foot back inside, I knew that everything had reverted back to the way it was before. No more framed pictures of Dmitri. No more alarming photo albums. In that clay-walled room where Dmitri spun tops and slept inside, it was just my home office again. To this day, I still have no clue what happened during that bizarre September weekend. But doing some of my own research, I'm starting to think I did encounter something in Moscow all those years ago. Some kind of lingering old curse, or a stray spirit, or a Chinara Vidama, a black witch disguised as an ordinary woman. Although I hadn't seen any evil things bubble up around my place since, every now and then I do have a conversation with Miss Babbage, and she seems to remember my son very well. Such a cute little guy, always waving hello. Did you know he offered me food once? I think it was Kraft dinner. Yeah, no, he either shifted reality for like a few days, like went to a different reality, and then where he had a Russian son named Dmitri. Or maybe Svetlana was like actually a witch of some sort. Gosh, stories like that always get me. Anyways, let's get on with the next one. It's from r/scary stories from user ZaylaMaze16. I'm never going camping again. 3 years ago, my friend group decided to go on a camping trip. Not just going to an RV park and chilling kind of camping, but a proper tent and campfire trip. See, I'm a chronic glamper. If given the choice between roughing it out in the wild and chilling in an air-conditioned RV, I'm picking the RV every time. I enjoy my creature comforts, and I always have. Jake, one of the guys that runs in our little group, prides himself on being a true outdoorsman. As our group usually ends up taking trips to nearby lakes and national parks, it's become a bit of a strain between the two of us. It'd be one thing if he could respect that I'm not here to have the authentic experience and just want to have fun, but he can't. He needles and mutters about how they could be going to cooler places if only we didn't have to always glamp to get out of the damn house. I think that's why I accepted his trip proposal. Normally, I'd shut it down without question, but he'd been getting on my nerves for years. I accepted, thinking I'd prove once and for all that I can do it the rough and tough way. Maybe then he'd leave me the hell alone. Jake planned out a trip for us and our 2 other friends to a nearby lake on his family's property. When we arrived, I tried to ask where exactly in there we were going, but he'd just smirk. Relax, Maddie. The trail's marked. Even you won't get lost. Behind me, Chris and Luke, the other 2 coming with us, started up a conversation about s'mores and the supposed lake at the place we're going to. I felt my shoulders relax. Jake pulled out a compass and led us due north. According to him, we had to follow the compass a little ways until we found some trees he and his family had marked with red triangles. From there, you follow the path. The sun was going down by the time we spotted the first red triangle. I checked my phone, which said it was about 7:30. I also checked my signal. Nothing. The pack straps were digging into my shoulders, and Luke was huffing as he trudged behind Chris and me. Funny, despite the fact that Luke was obviously the least capable of us, it's still me that Jake liked to piss on. Jake, I called. He paused and turned to me, a familiar, irritated expression on his face. Can we pause for a minute? I gotta go to the bathroom. I didn't mention that Luke looked ready to puke, but he seemed to see it anyway when he looked at him. Jake huffed. Don't get lost. I want to get to our site so we can get set up. I dropped my pack to the ground and started walking off the trail some. I could hear Luke wheezing behind me, obviously tired from the trek. The woods were quiet as I broke from the trail. I listened around for the birds or crickets, but it was dead silent. I glanced over my shoulder, making sure I was far enough away and relieved myself. I zipped up and began to turn back when a branch cracked behind me. My head snapped back in the direction of the noise, but there was nothing. I turned and began walking back, and the crunching of leaves started behind me. I stopped, and so did the noise. It was my own footsteps. It had to be. But I started again, faster this time, and nearly broke into a run when the crunching just seemed to get louder and louder. I busted through the tree line, hitting the trail and whirling around to see what had been on my heels. Nothing. I stared out at the forest waiting. There wasn't even a rustle of leaves from the wind, just silence. Matt, let's go, Chris called, breaking my staring contest with the empty trees. I turned and jogged up the trail to catch up with them. As I picked my pack up off the ground, I couldn't stop myself from asking, "Did you guys hear that?" They all turned to look at me. "Hear what?" Luke answered. I couldn't quite bring myself to spit it out. After all, what had I heard? Leaves crunching when I walked? I shook my head. Jake continued to lead us toward the campsite, the red triangles leading us ever onwards. I looked at them closer as we passed. They were spray painted on, with each tree being marked on both sides so that they could be seen no matter the direction you were coming from. Each marker was about 5 meters apart, and at any given time you could see the next few up ahead. The sun was nearly set when we broke through to the spot by the lake. I had to hand it to the bastard. The sight was beautiful. The trees all stood in glorious formation, shades of green mottled with the golden light of the sunset. The water shined a slightly muddy blue-gray, peppered with that same golden light stretching through the trees. We each picked a spot to pitch up our tents. Luke and I got put on tent duty while Chris and Jake, our 2 more experienced outdoorsmen, went out to find some good sticks for firewood. As I finished getting my tent up, I glanced over at Luke. He was struggling to get the stakes in the ground. I sighed, turning to help. We got his tent pitched and worked together to get the other 2 up. As we were finishing up with Chris's tent, the other 2 came back. I could see Jake looking over his tent, probably ready to find something to criticize me on. I was proud when he couldn't find anything. Chris and Jake threw some of the wood into the spot we designated as our fire pit, putting the rest of it close by for later use. They got the fire started and we all idly chatted as the sun sank beneath the hills. Luke got up and brought his backpack over. As he unzipped the pack and reached in, I smiled. Hershey's chocolate bars, a box of graham crackers, and giant fluffy marshmallows. I glanced over and saw my grin mirrored on Chris's face. Jake rolled his eyes, but obligingly got up to grab some sticks to roast the marshmallows on. We gorged ourselves on granola bars and s'mores as the world around us turned dark. "Hey Matt," Chris started. I looked at him, mouth and hands sticky with melted sugar. "Earlier today when you ran off to take a piss, what was that all about?" I looked at him puzzled. "You ran out of there like a bat out of hell. Then you were all, 'Did you guys hear that?'" He pitched his voice up and my eye twitched. He grinned goofily at me. I didn't quite know what to say. I didn't want to scare Luke, who was looking a bit nervous, and I still wasn't convinced I hadn't made the whole thing up. "I thought I heard something behind me," I settled on. Branch snapped kinda loud and it freaked me out. Jake snorted. "Really? All that fuss over a branch cracking? In the woods?" Yeah, I know. That's why I dropped it. It wasn't much." Chris and Luke exchanged a look, seeming to sense that wasn't quite it. But Jake was snickering at my foolishness, and neither quite seemed like they wanted to press. We all went to bed after putting the fire out. I tossed and turned some, but overall, the night passed on without incident. In the morning, we all woke up to the sound of Jake hollering that if we wanted to fish, now was the time before it got too hot. The lake was a blast. We sat around fishing for a while, chatting as the sun rose up in the sky. The fish were particularly hesitant to bite, but as Chris launched into a story, I found myself having a good time anyways. We scrambled some eggs we'd brought along in Jake's fancy cooler over the fire when we got hungry. I considered asking him if bringing food in was cheating, but it wasn't worth the fight. At about noon, we started swimming. The water was nice and warm from the summer heat, and I spent a good chunk of time just floating and soaking up the sun. That, of course, was ruined when Luke snuck up on me underwater and grabbed me around the gut, flipping me over and giving me a nose full of lake water. We splashed around for a good long while. The thing that drove us back to the shore was our grumbling stomachs. Luke and I were chatting excitedly about finding some good sticks for roasting the hot dogs we'd brought along when I ran straight into Chris's back. "Whoa, Chris, dude, what's..." I paused. Chris and Jake were just staring towards our campsite. I followed their gaze. Plastic littered the ground. All the meat we had brought with us had been torn out of its packages and was gone, leaving only the wrappers behind. Luke's tent, which had the marshmallows and chocolate, had its flap shredded. The flap was still zipped up closed, but the middle was gaping like an open wound. My blood ran cold. Luke had caught up and was looking as nervous as me. Even Jake looked shaken. I mean, we are in bear territory, I tried to reason. Guess we should have locked down the food a bit better. Jake looked pissed. You think I didn't plan for that? No damn bear is getting into these containers. I don't even know why they would. The meat's all packaged. They say bears are pretty smart. Maybe they, Luke tried. The cooler had a lock on it. No bear could undo. It'd have to bust the damn thing open. Silence weighed heavily on us as we looked at the cooler. The nice, shiny, pristine cooler. Maybe we should head back. I mean, we don't have any food left, Luke suggested nervously. I looked up at the sky. The sun was still relatively high, but it was rapidly sinking down. It'd be dark by the time we made it back to our cars. Then I looked over at Luke's tent. I stared at the shredded door, the carefully opened backpack. What was worse, risking getting lost in the woods or risking staying? That wasn't a real choice, and I knew it. Let's get our stuff packed up and let's go. We have our heavy-duty flashlights, I said. Chris and Luke didn't need any convincing. They hustled to get their tents taken down and their stuff ready. Jake looked hesitant. I don't think leaving now is a good idea. It's, he checked his watch, already 5:30. By the time we get back, it'll be dark, I know, I agreed. But it's either that or staying here for another night. He huffed and started getting his stuff together. My tent came down easy enough, and I had all my stuff packed quick. When I shrugged on my pack and turned to the other guys, I could see Jake stomping out the fire embers and grabbing his compass. Everyone got their lights? He said, bad mood evident. Chris and Luke nodded, although Luke looked vaguely ill at the thought of navigating by flashlight. I wasn't faring much better. We all started back the way we came in. Jake took the lead, following the trail markers. Luke followed close behind him. Chris and I took up the rear, keeping pace beside one another. You think it was a bear? He asked. I shrugged. I don't know. Never actually had an encounter with one. I have, he said. Dad and I went camping when I was a kid. Family next to us on the grounds didn't properly store up their trash. You saw it? Sure did. Black bear. Ugly thing. Spawned a whole lecture from my dad about how to properly store food and trash so you don't attract them. He paused. Not gonna lie to you, Matt. I don't think this was a bear. I waited for him to elaborate, but he just looked at the cooler Jake was carrying. We followed all the safety precautions. Not just that, we were pretty damn close to the shore. Splashing and running around, just lots of noise. Bears don't like noise. Jake, what way do we go? Luke called, interrupting our silent musing. I looked up from my feet, confused. The spray-painted red triangle was visible on the tree ahead of us. Jake paused. What way do we... He glanced around. I took the opportunity to do the same. Luke was practically bouncing from foot to foot in his eagerness to go. Where's the other path off to? Another part of the lake? He asked, giving a nervous laugh. Jake wasn't laughing, though. In fact, he was turning an alarming shade of white. I could feel his sudden fear radiating off of him, and I was starting to match it. Beyond the tree with our marker, I could distinctly see two paths marked in the same fashion. One veered off slightly to the left, and the other veered off slightly to the right. The marker was dead center. We'd have to choose a path. Jake, which one goes to our cars? I asked. It was a testament to how stunned he was that he didn't tear me a new one over questioning him. There'd only been one path coming up, and it was straight as an arrow. We hadn't even taken a little sidestep, had just marched straight through the woods. Neither of these paths went straight forward like we had when we came up. So what was this? A whole new split complete with a line of markers for a path that wouldn't take us back to our cars? Jake, you and your family put these markers up, right? Which way do we go? I asked, urgency creeping into my voice. I don't know, he said, his voice cracking. We never really went out from the path. We definitely didn't mark a new path, and we wouldn't mark one with the same damn markers. I looked up again. The sun had crept further down, painting the sky with a faint shade of orange. We were getting closer and closer to sunset. "Jake, are you sure you're going the right way?" Chris asked. I turned to see him and Luke huddled together behind us. "Yes, we go right. Ignore the damn markers on the left. We go right." "How do we know, though? I mean, those aren't the same markers we followed, right? There was only one path coming up," Chris nervously asked. Jake let out a frustrated huff. He slung his pack to the ground and walked over to a tree with some low-hanging branches. "I'll climb up here and find the clearing we parked near. That way, we could ignore the damn markers and go to the road. Happy?" He snarled before grabbing the branch and beginning to climb. We watched him climb till about halfway up when the leaves began to obscure him. I could hear the branches rustling as he continued his climb. "Well," Chris hollered. "I see the road," Jake yelled back. We all let out a sigh of relief. "This whole trip has been a nightmare," I commented. Luke and Chris both nodded. I waited to hear the crackling of tree branches as Jake climbed down, but they never came. We waited there at the bottom for what felt like an eternity. "Jake, buddy, you coming down from there?" Chris called. No answer. I frowned, trying to see through the thick canopy. Suddenly, I heard the sound of something hurtling through the branches. The crashing was fast, a free fall as whatever it was collided with everything in its path. I jumped back in time to avoid being knocked over the head with whatever it was that had fallen. I looked down. A hiking boot lay sideways on the ground, its ties unlaced. I looked back up to the canopy. The wind blew a little harder, shuffling the leaves just enough for me to see higher up in the tree. Jake was gone. I blinked once, twice, before turning back to the others. Chris and Luke both were staring at the shoe. Luke had Chris's arm in a vice grip, his breathing beginning to speed up in a telltale sign of panic. Chris looked back up. "Jake, where the hell are you? This ain't funny." Still silent. We waited 5 minutes, then 10. The only noise around us was the wind rustling through the leaves and the sound of Luke getting more and more antsy. When 15 had passed, I turned to Chris. "Left or right?" He looked at me startled. "What path? Left or right? Dude, what are you talking about? We can't leave Jake." "Jake's gone. I don't know how or why he seems to think it's funny to leave us here, scaring us half to death." I took a deep breath. "We gotta get back to our cars. Leave his pack there. When he wants to stop scaring the shit out of us, he can catch up." Chris paused for a long, tense moment before sighing. "Yeah, okay." He looked over at the two paths in front of us. "Look down the left and see if it looks familiar. I'll look down the right." I nodded and walked towards the left path. Chris and Luke began towards the right, looking down it to try and find some indication that was the right path. I walked to the first marker on the left. I couldn't understand why there were suddenly two paths. It didn't make any damn... I stilled. In front of me, a line of wet red had dripped down from the triangle. I watched it gleam, wet in the settling sun. This marker was new. And now that I was closer to it, I could smell the tang of copper. My heart seized in my chest, and I quickly cut across the paths to Chris and Luke, who were discussing their trail. They turned to me as I approached. "I think this might be it. Both sides of the tree are marked the same way it was when we..." "It's this one. The other," I sucked in a ragged breath, "the other one's fresh." "Fresh? The hell do you mean?" Chris started. I cut him off. It wasn't paint. The red is wet. It's fresh." "Someone painted a new path with the same marker? That's so messed up. Why the hell would..." "Chris, it's not paint." Luke, who had been watching the exchange, cut in. "What do you mean it's not paint? What else would it..." I could see the moment it clicked for him. Chris, too, tensed in realization. "Is this some kind of joke? You and Jake?" he asked, voice dangerously low. I whirled on him, almost hissing in rage. "You think I'd plan something like this? With him of all people? The The bastard couldn't even look at me without a comment on how shit I am at everything. The only reason he even lowered himself enough to pass me an invite is because he knew the two of you would want me to come along. And you think what? We planned some scary haunted trail? Even as I said it, I knew he didn't. Neither of them did. They both just wanted some rational explanation for all of this. I pushed past Chris to check the trail marker. I got close and checked it. My heart about stopped. It was wet. I turned back towards the clearing we were in before, charging across towards the markers we had been following. Wet, 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 all tinged with a coppery smell we'd been marching by too quickly to notice. I turned back towards Chris and Luke, and saw Chris was right behind me. "They're all wet?" he asked, wrinkling his nose as the smell hit him. We shared a glance, looking at the triangle nearest to us. Now what? I couldn't help to wonder. Here we are, in a rapidly darkening forest, lost without anyone who was even slightly familiar with the area. "I've got a compass in my pack," Chris answered. He set his pack on the ground and rummaged through it for a while before triumphantly pulling out the instrument. Jake had his on him when he went up that tree, but I have my own. He pointed in a direction off to our right. "South is that way. We go that direction. We should get close to the road. As long as you and me and Luke stay close together, we'll be fine." I nodded and turned towards where Luke was. "You hear that? We'll be fine. We just stick together and—" Luke was gone. Nausea slammed into me, turning my limbs into goo. Chris wildly looked around, calling for Luke. I grabbed onto his sleeve, terrified. "Chris," I said, keeping my voice low. He stopped his frantic yelling and looked at me. "Chris, we need to get to the road and get back to our cars." "Matt, we can't just leave Luke here. Jake knows this place, but Luke—" "Chris, we get to the car and we go somewhere with signal and call the cops. They can come out here with dogs and search and rescue teams, but for right now, we have to go." I could see him internally fighting a battle, but in the end, he nodded. I kept a hold of his sleeve as he led us south. The woods finally got dark enough that I grabbed the flashlight with my free hand. Chris went to grab his too, but I stopped him. "I've got the light. You keep leading us straight." He didn't fight me. He just nodded and continued leading us. Finally, I could see something through the trees. The road. I could hear Chris give a little sigh of relief, and we both started walking a little faster. "Where's the other path go off to? Another part of the lake?" A voice called behind us. We stopped. Dread crawled up my spine as Luke's voice washed over me. Chris was about to turn and call when I let go of his arm and covered his mouth. He looked at me, angry, when the voice came again. "Jake, what way do we go?" I felt a whimper crawl up my throat. I met Chris's eyes and jerked my head in the direction of the road. He nodded. We crept forward, taking care to keep our steps as light as possible. Behind us, sounding like he was wandering the forest, Luke's voice continued. The nausea increased tenfold as I realized it was just repetitions of things he had said earlier. The road ahead of us was clearer than ever, and as if heaven itself was lighting the way, it was lit in a soft golden glow. Chris broke free of my grasp and ran forward. The crunching of leaves and stick beneath him caused the voice to stop, and suddenly the sound of something barreling through the trees made its way to my ears. I sprinted after Chris, unwilling to turn and see what was behind us. We broke from the tree line, scared to death. The noise behind us didn't slow down. "Run across the road! Run!" I called, not even slightly slowing. I vaguely noticed that the light seemed to be getting brighter, but I ignored it in favor of sprinting harder. Chris cleared the road, and I was right behind him. I heard an odd noise, almost like brake squealing. I spun around in time to see something big behind us get thrown forward across the road as a car slammed into it. My jaw dropped as everything seemed to come to a stop. The car was dented on the hood, and its driver stumbled out, confused. I didn't hesitate, neither did Chris. We ran up to her, urging her back into the car. I think she caught sight of what it was she hit, because she just faintly told us to get in the back. We clambered in as she put the car in reverse and turned the car around. She started the car back towards town, and I couldn't help but stare out the back window. As the driver took a turn and the thing was going out of view, I saw it twitch and begin to rise up. The driver's name was Eve, and she was trying to head home from a work trip in another city. She'd been passing by through pure happenstance and was grilling us on what the hell that thing was. A deer, an elk, a moose. It's awful far down south for moose, but damn if that sucker wasn't big. I just asked her to drop us off at the police station. She looked back at us, confused, but said that was fine. I closed my eyes. When we got there, we told them the whole story. They obviously had some questions, and I knew they didn't believe us on multiple parts. They told us not to leave town and that they'll have some more questions for us later. They took us up in the morning to get our cars. When we got to the spot we'd parked, the cops just looked as baffled as Chris and I had felt this whole trip. Every window of all 4 of our cars was shattered. The tires were slashed with great big gashes, and the trunks had been ripped open by force. Luke's car even had a door ripped off the hinges. The offending piece of metal bent out of shape a few yards away. The cops just took us home. They never found Jake or Luke. Chris and I still keep in touch every now and again. I think that trip put a strain on our friendship. Eve and I, meanwhile, got a whole lot closer. So close, in fact, she's right here beside me as I type this. I don't know what's prompting me to recall this. Maybe some form of exposure therapy or a way to get it off my chest. I'm not sure. All I know is that I'm never going camping again. Yeah, I think the OP should have just stuck to glamping. There's no shame in just using a camper. You don't need a tent. Like, go to a campsite with a bunch of other people around. That sounded like the way to go. Again with the Skinwalker stories, too. Like, that was a really good one. I love the Skinwalker stories. Anyways, let me know what you guys thought about today's stories down in the comments below or in the Discord if you want to join. That link's going to be in the description. Huge shout out to my channel members. If you do want to further support the channel, that link's going to be down in the description. It is absolutely a choice and never necessary. If you guys liked today's video, drop a like and subscribe. Let me know what your favorite story was, and I'll see you tomorrow. Peace.